In the grand ballroom of a mansion, 16-year-old Isabella stood at the edge, feeling completely out of place. The lights glittered above her, and the laughter of well-dressed teenagers echoed through the room. She could hear the soft clink of glasses, the hum of a string quartet playing in the background, and the unmistakable sound of privilege that filled the air. Isabella had never been to a party like this before. In fact, she had never even dreamed of stepping foot in a place like this. Isabella's life had always been a struggle. She lived in a run-down apartment with her single mother, who worked multiple jobs just to keep them afloat. Isabella, who had been brought up with a sense of responsibility far beyond her years, often took on the role of caregiver. She had learned to survive by working part-time jobs after school, selling handmade crafts, and saving every penny. It was a hard life, but it had taught her resilience and made her determined to push beyond her circumstances. She had gotten the invitation to this party by chance. Her best friend, Carla, who had been invited by a rich boy named Nathaniel, had insisted that Isabella come along. It was an opportunity to get a glimpse into the world of the wealthy, an opportunity to escape the constant grind of her life, even if it was only for a few hours. Isabella had agreed reluctantly, unsure what to expect, and as soon as she stepped into the opulent mansion, she felt the walls close in on her. The mansion was a giant symbol of wealth, and she was the outsider. Isabella's thoughts swirled around as she watched everyone else mingle effortlessly. They seemed so different from her. Their clothes, their attitudes, the way they interacted. It was all a world she couldn't fully understand. She glanced around, trying to find Carla, but the crowd was thick. It was only when a loud voice cut through her thoughts that she was brought back to reality. "Isabella, you made it!" It was Nathaniel, the host, waving her over. He was a tall, handsome young man with an air of confidence that only wealth could afford. His white suit gleamed in the light, and the smile he gave her seemed genuine, even though Isabella couldn't shake the feeling of being utterly out of place. She hesitated before walking over to him, forcing a smile. "Thanks for inviting me," she said softly, still feeling like a fish out of water. "No problem at all. You're friends with Carla, right? Come, join the party. You're going to have a blast." Nathaniel's voice was cheerful and welcoming, but Isabella couldn't ignore the feeling that she was an intruder in a world she didn't belong to. As Isabella mingled awkwardly among the crowd, she noticed the difference in how people treated her. Some eyed her with curiosity, as though she didn't quite fit in, while others ignored her completely, too absorbed in their own conversations. She tried her best to seem confident, but there was a constant knot in her stomach. "Isabella, come over here." Carla waved her over from a corner, where a group of teenagers were gathered. Isabella felt a rush of relief and made her way toward her friend. Carla was a vision of grace, wearing a sparkling dress and laughing effortlessly with the other girls. "This is my friend Isabella," Carla introduced, and the others gave polite nods. But Isabella could tell they didn't really care. They looked at her like she was something foreign, something strange. She tried to hold her head high, but the insecurity crept in once again. Carla leaned in and whispered, "Hey, don't worry. They're not all bad. You'll get the hang of it." But Isabella wasn't sure if she ever would. The differences between her and these people were too glaring, too obvious. The evening wore on, and the atmosphere grew more relaxed, the music louder. Isabella found herself standing alone by the balcony, looking out at the twinkling lights of the city below. The contrast between the warmth and opulence of the mansion and the cold, concrete world she knew so well seemed too vast. Just then, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" It was Nathaniel again. He had stepped outside to take a breather, his glass of champagne in hand. "Sure," Isabella said, turning to face him. The conversation started with casual pleasantries, but soon, Isabella found herself telling Nathaniel about her life, the long hours of work, the constant worry over bills, and the dreams that felt so far out of reach. Nathaniel listened quietly, his gaze steady but without judgment. "I never thought I'd be able to relate to someone like you," he admitted after a pause. "I mean, here I am, living in this huge house, and you live such a different life." Isabella smiled faintly. "Yeah, but that's what makes us who we are, right? Our struggles shape us." The conversation drifted into an unexpected direction when Nathaniel asked, "Why did you come tonight? What made you want to see this world?" Isabella felt a weight settle in her chest. Her heart beat faster. What had made her come? Why had she decided to step into this world, knowing it would make her feel small? She looked at Nathaniel, and for the first time that night, something in her shifted. Her gaze turned steady, no longer filled with doubt or insecurity. "I wanted to see how the other half lives," she said simply. "But I also wanted to show that I'm not invisible, that I have something to offer too." Nathaniel's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, Isabella saw something in his expression that made her realize, maybe, just maybe, this evening wasn't as pointless as it had seemed. She wasn't just a poor girl at a rich kid's party. She was a person with her own worth, her own strength. And whether or not they realized it, they had all just been introduced to her. The party seemed to stretch on endlessly, but Isabella's discomfort didn't ease. The more she observed the rich kids around her, the more out of place she felt. Their conversations seemed to revolve around designer clothes, exclusive trips, and the latest gadgets, topics that felt foreign to her. Isabella had never owned anything brand name, let alone traveled to exotic places. But it wasn't just the material wealth that struck her. It was the ease with which they carried themselves. They spoke with confidence like they had nothing to prove. Everything in their world seemed effortless, while she had spent years just trying to get by. As the night wore on, Isabella found herself drawn into a conversation with a group of girls from Nathaniel's circle. They were giggling over the latest gossip about school, talking about boys and class assignments. Isabella tried to fit in, laughing along at their jokes, but inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that they saw her as an outsider, an uninvited guest at their exclusive gathering. "Isn't it just crazy how much money Nathaniel's parents have?" One of the girls, Olivia, remarked. She was wearing a deep red dress that shimmered under the lights. "I heard they've got a yacht in the Caribbean and an entire floor in that new luxury building downtown." Isabella nodded politely, though the idea of owning a yacht felt as distant to her as a fantasy. She didn't want to reveal her discomfort, so she just smiled, hoping they wouldn't notice her growing sense of alienation. But it was then that one of the girls, a blonde with bright blue eyes, turned to her and said, "So, Isabella, what's your story? How'd you end up at Nathaniel's party?" The question was casual, but the undertone felt like an examination. The other girls looked at her, waiting for an answer. For a moment, Isabella's heart skipped a beat. How could she explain her life? Her daily grind, the struggle to keep her family afloat, the constant worry that she wouldn't be able to make it to tomorrow? She could feel the weight of their eyes on her, and she knew the answer needed to be something that would fit into their world, something that wouldn't make her seem too different. "Carla invited me," Isabella said with a quick smile, trying to sound casual. "We've known each other for years. Just thought it'd be fun to see how the other half lives." There was a slight pause before Olivia spoke again, her voice laced with curiosity. "You mean, you don't mind hanging out with all of us?" She seemed to take a particular interest in Isabella, as though trying to see if she truly belonged. Isabella forced a laugh. The tension in her chest was palpable. "No, not at all. It's interesting, really. Different from what I'm used to, but interesting." Olivia studied her for a moment before nodding, accepting the answer, though Isabella wasn't sure if she'd bought it. Before the conversation could continue, the music shifted, and a loud cheer went up from the center of the room as Nathaniel approached with a tray of drinks, smiling as he greeted the guests. As the night drew on, the party shifted into a different gear. People were dancing and laughing louder, and the alcohol began to flow more freely. Isabella had initially hesitated to join the crowd, but the pull of socializing tugged at her, and she found herself among the dancing teens, trying to keep her movements graceful, trying to blend in. It was Nathaniel who suddenly caught her eye, pulling her gently into the circle. "Come on, Isabella," he said, his voice slightly slurred from a couple of drinks. "You're too quiet. Join us." Isabella's heart raced, but she smiled and nodded. The warmth of the crowd seemed to wrap around her as she danced, the beat of the music pulsing through her veins. For the first time that night, she felt something close to belonging. She wasn't just the poor girl in the corner, she was part of something. Even if only for a moment, she could forget the life she'd left behind, the life that always felt like a weight on her shoulders. But then, as if on cue, something happened that shattered the fleeting sense of ease she had felt. As they danced, someone, Olivia perhaps, knocked into Isabella's drink, sending it spilling across the expensive rug. "Oh no," Isabella gasped, immediately bending to try to clean up the mess. The room had been spinning with the music, but now it felt like time slowed, all eyes turning toward her. "Careful!" someone shouted from the sidelines. The scorn in their voice was clear. "Don't ruin the rug, poor girl." Isabella froze, the sting of their words cutting through the air like a knife. She looked up, only to see the condescending smirks on the faces of the onlookers. Her heart pounded in her chest. In that moment, it felt like everything about her, the clothes, the life, the struggle, had been laid bare for them to judge. Nathaniel, who had been dancing nearby, rushed over. "It's fine. It was an accident," he reassured the group. But Isabella could see the awkwardness in his eyes. He wasn't sure how to handle it. The music continued, but the tension lingered. Isabella stood back up, feeling small, and quickly walked to the edge of the room. She needed to get away, to find a moment to breathe and collect herself. As she stood near the balcony once again, looking out at the stars, her emotions surged: anger, shame, frustration. How could they treat her like that? She wasn't just some poor girl to be pitied or mocked. She was a person with her own value. It was then that she heard footsteps behind her. Nathaniel's voice, calm but sincere, broke through her thoughts. "Isabella, are you okay?" he asked, coming up beside her. For a long time, Isabella didn't say anything. She simply stared out at the view, trying to steady her breath. But finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. "I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter, like I'm invisible." Nathaniel was silent for a moment, taking in her words. "You don't deserve that," he said quietly. "You matter. You've always mattered." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that made Isabella look at him. His words made her feel seen, made her feel heard, even in a world where she often felt invisible. But just as Isabella felt a brief sense of connection, something else shifted in the room. There was a whisper, a hushed murmur, that spread through the crowd like wildfire. People were talking in low voices, pointing toward the entrance of the room where the party's host, Nathaniel, had just reappeared. His gaze was focused, and he seemed unsettled. It wasn't long before a voice rose above the rest. It came from a girl at the edge of the room, someone who had been eyeing Isabella all night. "Isn't that the girl from the wrong side of town? Isn't she—" The voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Nathaniel stiffened, and Isabella's heart sank. She felt their judgment once again, this time sharper than ever. She could feel every pair of eyes on her as the crowd waited for her to speak. But before she could gather her thoughts, something happened. Something that made the entire room go silent. Isabella stepped forward, her voice suddenly clear and firm, cutting through the tense air. "Actually, yes, I am from the wrong side of town, but that doesn't make me any less of a person than any of you." The room fell deathly quiet. No one spoke. And in that silence, Isabella's words echoed louder than any music ever could. She wasn't just speaking for herself now. She was speaking for everyone who had ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or invisible. The room was still. Isabella's words hung in the air, reverberating in the silence that had descended like a thick fog. She could feel the stares, the disbelief in their eyes, And yet, this moment had a strange sense of power. The weight of the judgment that had always been cast upon her had suddenly shifted. But before anyone could respond, Nathaniel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "She's right," he said, his tone firm but unmistakably defensive. The room seemed to exhale collectively as people turned to him, waiting for more. "I invited her here. She's my guest, and she deserves respect," Nathaniel continued, his gaze steady as it moved over the crowd, meeting the eyes of those whispering moments before. Isabella watched, surprised by his words. She had always known Nathaniel to be kind, but she hadn't expected him to stand up for her like this. Not in front of his friends, not in front of the people who had looked down on her from the very beginning. It made her heart race, a mix of gratitude and confusion filling her chest. Was he only doing this because he felt sorry for her, or was there something more to it? For a moment, everything was still. The music had stopped, and all eyes were on Nathaniel and Isabella. The rich kids who had once looked at her with disdain now looked to Nathaniel for guidance, unsure of what to do next. Isabella's mind raced. She had never been in a situation like this before. Never had someone speak up for her so openly. In her world, the poor didn't have voices that were heard. They were invisible, unnoticed, their struggles forgotten by those with money and privilege. But here, in this house, on this night, she was being seen. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. Isabella's heart thudded in her chest as the seconds ticked by. What came next would decide everything. The trajectory of her life, her relationship with Nathaniel, and how she would be perceived from that moment forward. And then, before she could stop herself, a voice inside her spoke up. The voice she had long silenced, the voice that demanded to be heard. She had a secret, a truth she had buried deep within herself for years. "I'm not just the poor girl who doesn't belong here," she said, her voice stronger now, her words clear. "There's something you all need to know." The room grew even quieter. People exchanged uncertain glances, waiting for her to speak. Isabella felt a sense of resolve wash over her. This was her moment. She had nothing left to lose. Nathaniel, still standing by her side, watched her carefully. There was a flicker of confusion in his eyes, but he said nothing. He let her speak. The crowd's attention shifted entirely to her, waiting for her to reveal whatever secret she was about to share. Isabella's pulse quickened, and for a moment she hesitated. Was she ready to reveal her past? But then, as she looked around the room, she realized it didn't matter anymore. The judgments, the expectations, they didn't define her. They didn't define her story. "I didn't come from nothing," Isabella continued, her voice shaking but resolute. "I come from a family that had it all. We were wealthy. My father was a businessman who built his empire from the ground up, but it was all taken away by greed, by choices, by things I didn't have control over." There was a collective gasp in the room. No one had expected her to say that, especially not in front of everyone. The rich kids, who had been so quick to judge her, now stared at her with wide eyes, the smug expressions vanishing from their faces. Isabella took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she steadied herself against the railing of the balcony. "I used to live in a mansion just like this one," she said, her voice steadying. "I used to wear designer clothes and go to the best schools, but then everything fell apart. My father lost everything in a business deal gone wrong. My family was torn apart, and we were left with nothing." The room was dead silent now. The other guests didn't know what to say. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected the girl they had been mocking to come from such a wealthy background, one that was so similar to their own. Isabella's voice faltered slightly as she continued. "We ended up moving into a tiny apartment in the worst part of town. My mother couldn't handle it, and she left. And I had to grow up fast. I had to take care of my younger siblings, work whatever jobs I could find just to keep us afloat." Her chest tightened as she spoke the words, the weight of her past pressing down on her. It had been so long since she had spoken of those days, since she had let herself think about them. The pain of it, the shame of losing everything, had stayed buried inside her for years. But now, here she was, standing in front of the most privileged people she'd ever met, and she was letting it all out. She was no longer ashamed. Nathaniel stepped closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to explain yourself," he said softly. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." But Isabella shook her head. "No," she said, her eyes brimming with emotion. "I do. I need them to know that I'm not just some charity case. I need them to know that I've fought, I've struggled, and I've lost. But I'm still here. I'm still standing." The room remained silent, but something had shifted. Nathaniel's friends, who had once looked at Isabella as a curiosity, now looked at her with a mix of awe and respect. They didn't know what to say, but the change in their gaze was unmistakable. Isabella had done the impossible. She had made them see her, not as the poor girl they had thought her to be, but as someone who had overcome, who had fought, and who deserved respect. And then, as the weight of Isabella's words lingered in the air, something unexpected happened. The murmur of voices began to rise, but not in judgment. This time, it was different. The crowd seemed to buzz with a new energy, a shift in the atmosphere that Isabella couldn't quite understand. Olivia, the girl who had been so quick to judge her earlier, stepped forward. I didn't know," she said softly, her voice hesitant. "I'm sorry. I never meant to." Isabella cut her off gently, holding up a hand. "It's okay," she said with a small smile. "You didn't know, but now you do." There was a long moment of silence before the first of Nathaniel's friends spoke up. "You're incredible," he said. "I don't think any of us have any idea what that's like. We're sorry if we ever made you feel less than." The apology was sincere, and Isabella could see the change in them. They weren't just pitying her, they were beginning to understand. This was the power of her truth, the weight of her experience, laid bare for all to see. Nathaniel smiled at her, his eyes shining with pride. "You've always been incredible, Isabella. You just needed the world to see it." For the first time that night, Isabella truly believed it. She had revealed her secret, and instead of being silenced, it had made her voice stronger. She had claimed her place in this world, not as a poor girl, but as someone with a story that demanded to be heard. The night wasn't over yet. The music resumed, and slowly, the crowd began to relax. But things had changed. The people in this room, the people who had once dismissed her, were now listening, learning, and, maybe for the first time, understanding. Months had passed since that fateful night at the mansion. The once overwhelming memory of humiliation and pain had been replaced by a newfound sense of purpose for Isabella. Life had not magically become easy, but her resilience, combined with the opportunities Nathaniel's foundation provided, had transformed her trajectory. Isabella now worked as a program coordinator for the foundation, guiding families like hers toward stability and hope. Her confidence had grown, bolstered by the gratitude of those she helped and the belief that her struggles had meaning. Every morning she would step into the modest yet vibrant office, where walls were lined with photos of smiling children and testimonials from families who had benefited from the initiative. Her daughter, Lily, thrived in the nurturing environment of her new school, where she had quickly become a star pupil and a budding artist. One afternoon, Isabella admired a painting Lily brought home, an abstract piece featuring a girl holding a candle in a dark room. When asked about it, Lily explained, "The candle is for when people feel lost. It shows them where to go." Isabella couldn't help but smile. "Just like you and me, huh?" she said, pulling Lily into a warm embrace. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's mansion, once a cold monument to isolation, had become a hub of activity. Every weekend, the grand halls were filled with laughter, chatter, and the occasional shriek of excitement from children attending workshops and community events. The transformation had extended beyond the building itself. It had brought life back to Nathaniel as well. He had immersed himself in the foundation's work, personally mentoring young adults who reminded him of his younger brother. His leadership style, once marked by aloofness, had evolved into one of warmth and collaboration. Those who had known him before marveled at the change, while newcomers saw him as a man deeply committed to making a difference. Ms. Grace, Nathaniel's trusted advisor, often teased him about the new direction his life had taken. "It's about time you stopped hiding behind those walls," she'd say with a knowing smile. "You're finally becoming the man your brother always knew you could be." One crisp autumn afternoon, Nathaniel invited Isabella and Lily to a small ceremony at the mansion. They stood together in the newly landscaped garden, where a plaque had been placed beneath a towering oak tree. The inscription read, "In loving memory of Daniel Worthington, a light that guides us forward." Nathaniel's voice cracked slightly as he spoke to the gathering. "This tree is a symbol of growth, resilience, and connection. It stands as a reminder that even when we face loss, we can honor what we've lost by nurturing what remains." Isabella stepped forward, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You've not only changed your own life, Nathaniel," she said, her voice steady, "but you've given countless others the chance to change theirs. This foundation is a testament to what happens when we choose to see the good in one another." The small crowd erupted into applause, and as Nathaniel and Isabella exchanged a warm smile, Lily ran up to the tree, placing a small drawing at its base. It was her candle painting, now surrounded by a bright halo of golden light. That evening, Nathaniel hosted a dinner at the mansion for Isabella, Lily, and a few close colleagues from the foundation. The once empty dining hall was now filled with lively conversation and the aroma of home-cooked dishes prepared by Nathaniel himself. As the group laughed and shared stories, Lily sat beside Nathaniel, proudly explaining her plans to start an art club at school. Nathaniel listened intently, his eyes lighting up with every word. "You've got your mother's determination," he said warmly, "and her heart." Later, as the evening wound down, Nathaniel raised his glass for a final toast. "To the unexpected twists that bring us together," he said, "and to the family we build along the way." As Isabella and Lily walked home that night, hand in hand, the city lights twinkled above them like stars. Isabella glanced down at her daughter, who was humming a cheerful tune, and felt an overwhelming sense of peace. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Isabella mused aloud. Lily looked up with a grin. "And we're going even further." Isabella nodded, her heart full. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face them. Together, they were unstoppable. But as one truth emerges in the grand ballroom of privilege, another unfolds in the quiet corridors of a mansion. In a different part of the city, a single mother's ordinary job takes an extraordinary turn when she uncovers a secret diary. 2 lives, 2 stories, connected by the threads of resilience and unexpected revelations. And just like Isabella's courage, the choices made here will shape destinies and change lives forever. Emma Scott and her son Ethan, where another journey of truth and connection begins. Emma Scott, a single mother working as a maid in a millionaire's mansion, stumbles upon a hidden diary that holds secrets capable of unraveling her life. The diary reveals a shocking connection between her late husband and the reclusive millionaire Jason Harlow. A truth buried in its pages will forever alter the course of their lives. Emma Scott wakes up to another day of juggling her roles as a single mother and a struggling worker. Her 8-year-old son, Ethan, is her entire world, a bright and curious child who dreams of becoming an artist. Life for Emma, however, is anything but a dream. Since the sudden passing of her husband, Peter, she's worked tirelessly in multiple jobs to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. The weight of unpaid bills and the pressure to provide the life Ethan deserves make every day a battle. When Emma receives an offer to work as a live-in maid at the mansion of Jason Harlow, a wealthy but mysterious businessman, she sees it as her lifeline. The pay is far better than anything she's earned before, and it means she can finally stop working late shifts that keep her away from Ethan. Packing their modest belongings into a worn suitcase, Emma moves into the mansion, determined to make this new chapter work. Jason Harlow's mansion looms on the outskirts of the city, its grandeur both captivating and intimidating. A self-made millionaire, Jason has spent years building his business empire, yet his success has come at a heavy cost. Behind the walls of his luxurious home, Jason leads a lonely, isolated life. Haunted by the tragic death of his younger brother Peter, Jason hides his pain behind a cold and detached exterior. His only companion is Mr. Thomas, his loyal but rigid butler, who ensures the house operates with military precision. On her first day, Emma is struck by the stark contrast between Jason's sterile, lifeless mansion and her own chaotic but loving home. Mr. Thomas greets her with a list of strict rules. Stay out of the private study, don't question Jason's behavior, and never interact with him unless spoken to first. Jason himself makes only a brief, curt appearance, leaving Emma feeling unwelcome and out of place. Despite the uninviting atmosphere, Emma resolves to focus on her work, knowing that this job is her ticket to a better future for Ethan. One evening, while tidying Jason's study, Emma accidentally stumbles upon a hidden drawer. Inside, she discovers an old leather-bound diary. Its worn cover and faint smell of ink suggest it hasn't been touched in years. Torn between her sense of professionalism and growing curiosity, Emma hesitates before finally opening it. The diary's pages reveal a side of Jason she never imagined. He writes about his close bond with his younger brother Peter, and the rift that tore them apart years ago. Jason's regret and pain seep through every word, painting a picture of a man burdened by loss. Tucked between the pages, Emma finds a photograph of a smiling young Jason with Peter. Her heart stops as she notices the striking resemblance between Peter and her late husband, Peter Scott. Shaken, Emma clutches the photo and diary. Could it be a coincidence? Or is there a deeper connection between her family and Jason's that she never knew? As the questions swirl in her mind, Emma realizes that the answers could change everything she thought she knew about her and Ethan's future. Emma's life at the mansion slowly takes shape, though the weight of her discovery remains heavy on her mind. By day, she throws herself into her duties, scrubbing marble floors and tidying rooms that seem untouched by life. By night, her thoughts wander to the secrets in Jason's diary, particularly the photo of Peter, whose familiar features haunt her dreams. Meanwhile, Ethan's natural curiosity starts to uncover the layers of the mansion that had remained dormant for years. One sunny afternoon, he ventures into the mansion's vast library, marveling at the rows of books that stretch to the ceiling. There, he encounters Jason for the first time since their arrival. Jason, who had been sitting quietly by the fireplace, looks up, startled by the boy's presence. "Do you like books?" Jason asks, his voice softer than Emma expected. Ethan, ever enthusiastic, nods and picks up a book about ocean exploration from the nearest shelf. His innocent excitement stirs something in Jason, who remembers Peter's love for adventure and discovery. Though hesitant, Jason starts a conversation with Ethan about the book, sharing stories from his own childhood. Over the next few days, Jason and Ethan begin to form a fragile connection. Ethan's warmth and curiosity act as a balm for Jason's guarded soul, while Jason's patient explanations about the mansion and its history captivate the boy. For Emma, watching their bond grow is both heartwarming and unsettling. The sight of Jason and Ethan together feels strangely familiar, as though she's witnessing something from a past life. But Ethan's explorations also lead to complications. While wandering through one of the older wings of the mansion, he stumbles across Jason's private study, the room Emma had promised herself she wouldn't enter again. Ethan's discovery of a peculiar-looking key sparks his curiosity further. Emma catches him just in time, her heart racing as she ushers him away. Despite her attempts to maintain boundaries, the secrets of the mansion seem determined to reveal themselves. Emma begins to suspect that her presence here isn't just a coincidence. The tension builds as her loyalty to her job clashes with her growing need for answers. As Ethan's bond with Jason deepens, Emma begins to notice subtle changes in the household. Jason, once reclusive and cold, seems to find solace in Ethan's energy. He spends more time outside his private study, occasionally joining Emma and Ethan during breakfast. For Jason, these moments are a quiet revelation. Ethan's innocence and zest for life remind him of the family he lost, and the family he might still have a chance to protect. One evening, Jason takes Ethan to the greenhouse, a part of the estate long abandoned since Peter's passing. The glass walls are covered in dust, and the once vibrant plants are overgrown and wilted. This was Peter's favorite place, Jason confesses, his voice tinged with sorrow. Ethan's eyes light up at the prospect of reviving the greenhouse, and Jason, moved by the boy's enthusiasm, agrees to let him help restore it. Meanwhile, Emma struggles with the growing complexity of her feelings. The sight of Jason laughing with Ethan stirs both hope and fear. She fears Jason's growing attachment to Ethan will lead to heartbreak if the truth about their shared connection comes to light. Emma spends her evenings rereading the diary, seeking clues that could help her piece together the story. Each entry paints a picture of Jason and Peter's childhood shared dreams, their fallout, and Jason's lingering regret. One fateful afternoon, Ethan stumbles upon the diary while looking for a book in Emma's room. "What's this?" he asks innocently, holding it up to her. Panic flashes across Emma's face as she takes it from him. "It's just an old book, sweetie," she replies, tucking it away quickly. But Ethan's curiosity is piqued, and Emma knows it's only a matter of time before he digs deeper. Later that week, Jason invites Emma and Ethan to join him for dinner, a rare gesture that surprises both of them. Over the course of the meal, Jason shares stories about his business ventures and Peter's adventurous spirit. Ethan listens intently, his eyes wide with fascination. At one point, he blurts out, "You remind me of my dad." The room falls silent. Jason looks at Emma, his expression unreadable, while Emma's heart pounds in her chest. Jason changes the subject quickly, but the tension lingers long after the meal ends. For the first time, Jason begins to wonder if there's more to Emma's story than she's letting on. He resolves to uncover the truth, even if it means confronting the past he's tried so hard to bury. Jason's suspicions grow as small details about Emma and Ethan begin to align with memories of his late brother, Peter. He starts observing Emma more closely, noting the familiar way Ethan's eyes light up when he talks about his father. Quietly, Jason begins to search for answers. He combs through old letters and photographs in his study, looking for anything that might connect him to Emma and Ethan. One evening, Jason finds an old photograph of himself and Peter during their childhood. The image sparks memories of their bond, their dreams of building a legacy together, and the argument that tore them apart. With the photo clutched in his hand, Jason wonders if the child Peter left behind could be closer than he ever imagined. Unaware of Jason's internal struggle, Ethan continues to bring light and laughter to the mansion. His enthusiasm for restoring the greenhouse becomes infectious, drawing both Jason and Emma into the project. As they work together, Emma sees glimpses of a man she hadn't thought possible. A caring, vulnerable Jason, who smiles more often and seems at ease around Ethan. However, the cracks in Jason's stoic facade deepen when Ethan innocently mentions a story his mother once told him about his father. "Mom said Dad had a brother who was always there for him, no matter what," Ethan says, his voice filled with admiration. Jason freezes, his mind racing. He doesn't press the boy for more information, but feels the walls of his carefully guarded life beginning to close in. Later that night, Emma finds Jason in the library, sitting in the dim light with a glass of whiskey in hand. He's staring at the photograph of Peter, his expression a mix of pain and longing. Gathering her courage, Emma approaches him. "Jason," she says softly, "I think there's something we need to talk about." Jason looks up, his eyes heavy with emotion. But before Emma can speak further, Ethan bursts into the room, holding a sketch he made of the greenhouse. The growing tension between Jason and Emma comes to a head, when Ethan stumbles into the mansion's greenhouse late one afternoon. While exploring its labyrinth of overgrown vines and broken flower pots, Ethan trips on a loose stone, falling and scraping his knee. His cries echo through the estate, drawing Jason and Emma to the scene in a panic. Jason reaches Ethan first, scooping him up with uncharacteristic tenderness. "You're okay, champ," he says, inspecting the wound and using his scarf to gently stop the bleeding. Ethan sniffles but nods, visibly comforted by Jason's care. Emma arrives moments later, her face pale with worry. She crouches beside Ethan, taking his small hand in hers. As Jason helps carry Ethan back to the house, the weight of the moment strikes both him and Emma. Jason can't shake the image of himself as a boy, clinging to Peter in moments of need. Emma, on the other hand, sees Jason in a new light, a man capable of love and protection, despite his hardened exterior. Back in the mansion, with Ethan safely bandaged and resting in his room, Jason decides he can no longer avoid the truth. He summons Emma to his study, where the atmosphere is heavy with unspoken words. "Emma," Jason begins, his voice measured but firm. "I need to know. The photograph in my diary, how do you have it?" Emma takes a deep breath, her hands trembling as she retrieves the diary from her bag. "Jason, I think Peter was my husband," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. The confession lands like a thunderclap, and for a moment, Jason says nothing, his expression unreadable. "Peter," Jason murmurs, his gaze distant as he processes the revelation. "He left after our fight. I never thought—" His voice breaks, and he turns away, his shoulders heavy with regret. "Why didn't I know? Why didn't he tell me?" Emma steps closer, her own emotions threatening to spill over. "He tried to protect us. He never wanted to burden you, Jason. But when he passed, I didn't know where else to turn. I didn't even realize—" She falters, struggling to find the right words. Jason finally meets her eyes, the pain and longing in his expression cutting through the barriers he's built. "Emma, if what you're saying is true, then Ethan is all I have left of him." The confession solidifies their bond, but it also sets the stage for the inevitable reckoning with the past. Jason's resolve to protect Ethan and make amends for his estrangement from Peter grows stronger. Emma, too, finds herself opening up to the possibility of trust and healing, though the path ahead is uncertain. The truth about Ethan's lineage creates a whirlwind of emotions for both Jason and Emma. While Jason wrestles with regret over his estranged relationship with Peter, Emma worries about how the revelation will affect Ethan's future. The atmosphere in the mansion shifts. The once silent halls are now filled with conversations that dance around the heart of the matter, as both Jason and Emma try to find the courage to confront their fears head-on. One evening, Jason invites Emma to his study, determined to discuss their shared connection in detail. The room is dimly lit, and the weight of the conversation hangs in the air as Emma takes a seat across from him. Jason begins with an apology, his voice tinged with remorse. "I don't know how I let my brother slip away. If I had known he had a family, if I had known about you and Ethan, I would have done things differently." Emma nods, her expression softening. "Peter never blamed you, Jason. He always spoke of you with pride, even when things were difficult between you two. He wanted to reach out, but he felt it was too late." Jason looks at her, his eyes clouded with pain. "It was too late, for him and for me. But it's not too late for Ethan. I want to be a part of his life, Emma, if you'll let me." The sincerity in Jason's voice takes Emma by surprise, but she knows she must tread carefully. Before she can respond, a loud crash echoes from the greenhouse. Both Jason and Emma rush outside to find Ethan on the ground, surrounded by shattered glass. A toppled ladder lies nearby, and Ethan is clutching his arm in pain. Jason kneels beside him, panic etched on his face. "Ethan, are you hurt?" Ethan winces, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I just wanted to fix the window," he sobs, pointing to a broken pane in the greenhouse ceiling. Jason lifts Ethan into his arms, his voice trembling as he reassures the boy. "You're going to be okay, champ. I've got you." As Jason carries Ethan back into the house, Emma follows closely, her heart pounding with fear and gratitude. Jason's protective instincts remind her of Peter, and for the first time, she begins to see Jason as more than just a grieving brother or a distant employer. In the quiet hours that follow, as the doctor bandages Ethan's arm, Jason and Emma sit together in silence. The near accident has shaken them both, but it also underscores the fragile bond that ties them together. Jason finally breaks the silence, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Emma, I don't want to lose another chance to make things right. I need to be there for Ethan, not just as a guardian, but as family." Ethan's accident serves as a turning point for Jason, solidifying his determination to step into a meaningful role in Ethan's life. The next morning, Jason joins Ethan for breakfast, a rare occurrence that surprises both Emma and Ethan. As they eat, Jason engages Ethan in conversation about favorite hobbies and school projects, fostering a sense of connection that feels both natural and his overdue. "Mom says you're really good at chess," Ethan says, his voice filled with curiosity. "Can you teach me sometime?" Jason smiles, a faint glimmer of pride breaking through his usual stoicism. "Of course, champ. Your Uncle Peter loved chess too. He used to beat me every single time." Emma watches the exchange quietly, her emotions swirling. The sight of Jason and Ethan bonding stirs both hope and fear. She knows Jason's intentions are sincere, but she can't shake the worry that Ethan's attachment to Jason might lead to heartbreak if their fragile connection falters. Later that day, Jason approaches Emma in the kitchen, his expression earnest. "I want to do more for Ethan," he begins, leaning against the counter. "I've been thinking about setting up a trust for his education, something that ensures he'll have every opportunity, no matter what." Emma hesitates, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Jason, that's incredibly generous, but Ethan doesn't need your money. He needs stability, someone he can count on. If you're serious about being in his life, it has to be about more than just financial support." Jason nods, her words striking a chord. "I understand," he says softly. "That's why I need to earn his trust, and yours. I can't undo the past, but I can try to be the kind of person Peter would have wanted me to be." As Jason and Emma navigate their growing partnership, Ethan remains blissfully unaware of the emotional undercurrents around him. His excitement about the greenhouse project continues to bring life to the mansion, and Jason finds himself drawn into the boys' world. Together, they plant new seeds and clear away the overgrowth, transforming the neglected space into a vibrant sanctuary. During one of their afternoons in the greenhouse, Ethan innocently asks a question that catches Jason off guard. "Do you think my dad would have liked this?" Jason pauses, his heart heavy with the weight of Ethan's question. "I think he would have loved it," Jason replies, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "He always believed in building things that could grow and thrive, just like you're doing here." Ethan beams at the response, but Emma, standing nearby, feels tears prick her eyes. Jason's words, though simple, carry a depth of sincerity that she hadn't expected. For the first time, she allows herself to imagine a future where Jason plays an active role in Ethan's life, not just as an uncle, but as a father figure. Jason's efforts to connect with Ethan continue to blossom, but as their bond strengthens, the weight of unresolved emotions grows heavier for both Jason and Emma. One evening, as the three of them sit by the fireplace, Ethan sketches quietly while Jason and Emma share a rare moment of open conversation. "Peter always talked about the stars," Jason says, his gaze fixed on the crackling flames. "He believed they were reminders of all the things we can't see but are still connected to. I never understood that until now." Emma listens intently, her heart aching at the vulnerability in Jason's voice. "He used to tell me the same thing," she says softly. "On the nights when things felt impossible, he'd look at the sky and say, 'The stars have been here long before us and will remain long after.' That kind of permanence is comforting, isn't it?" Jason smiles faintly, his expression a mixture of fondness and regret. I wish I could have heard him say that. Instead, I wasted so much time being angry, thinking he abandoned our family when all he wanted was freedom from the weight of our arguments. Emma reaches for Jason's hand, her touch hesitant but reassuring. You have a chance to make things right now, Jason. Ethan needs someone who understands where he comes from, someone who can show him the strength in his roots. Their moment is interrupted when Ethan proudly holds up his sketch, a drawing of their newly restored greenhouse under a starry sky. Do you like it? He asks eagerly, looking between Jason and Emma. Jason takes the drawing, his eyes scanning the careful details Ethan has captured. I don't just like it, Ethan, he says with a warm smile. I love it. You're incredibly talented. Ethan beams at the praise, and Emma can't help but smile. The bond between Jason and Ethan feels more natural with each passing day, but Emma knows that the unspoken truth about their shared connection must soon be addressed. The following morning, Jason makes a bold decision. He invites Emma and Ethan to join him for a trip to his family's old lake house, a place steeped in memories of his childhood with Peter. The drive is filled with stories about Jason's past, and by the time they arrive, Ethan is eager to explore the property. As Ethan runs ahead, Jason and Emma take a quiet walk by the water. Jason pauses, his gaze fixed on the rippling surface. Emma, there's something I need to say, he begins, his voice low but steady. I've spent so much of my life hiding from the past, but you and Ethan have made me realize that it's time to face it head on. I want to do whatever it takes to be a part of your lives, not as a replacement for Peter, but as someone who honors his memory. Jason's words hang in the air, heavy with sincerity. Emma hesitates, her emotions swirling as she grapples with the implications of letting Jason fully into their lives. Jason, she says softly, her eyes meeting his. This isn't just about honoring Peter. This is about Ethan and what's best for him. If you're serious about being in his life, you have to be ready to commit, not just for now, but for the long haul. Jason nods, his expression resolute. I know, Emma. I've spent too long running from responsibility and letting guilt dictate my actions. But being with you and Ethan has shown me what I've been missing. I'm ready to step up, not just as Peter's brother, but as someone Ethan can count on. Their conversation is interrupted by Ethan's excited shouts from the lake. He's found an old wooden rowboat tied to the dock and is waving enthusiastically for Jason and Emma to join him. The two adults exchange a glance, their shared smile reflecting the cautious hope growing between them. As they climb into the boat, Jason begins to share stories of his childhood adventures with Peter at the lake house, how they'd row out to the middle of the lake and pretend they were explorers charting uncharted waters. Ethan listens intently, his laughter ringing out as Jason animatedly recounts their misadventures. Midway through their excursion, Jason pauses, his voice softening. Ethan, there's something I want to tell you, he begins, his tone careful but steady. Emma stiffens slightly, but she doesn't interrupt. Your dad, my brother, was one of the most incredible people I've ever known. He was kind, brave, and always knew how to find the best in people. You remind me so much of him. Ethan tilts his head, curious. Did you and Dad fight like I do with my friends sometimes? He asks innocently. Jason chuckles, though there's a trace of sadness in his expression. We did, but no matter what, we always loved each other. And now, I see him in you every day. As they return to shore, Ethan's questions grow, and Jason answers them with a level of openness he hadn't thought himself capable of before. Emma watches from the sidelines, her heart full as she sees Jason embrace his role as both an uncle and a father figure. Later that evening, as Ethan sleeps soundly in the lake house, Jason and Emma sit together on the porch, the moonlight reflecting off the water. Jason turns to Emma, his voice firm but gentle. Thank you for giving me this chance, Emma. I won't let you or Ethan down. Emma smiles, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I believe you, Jason, and I think Peter would be proud of the man you're becoming. With the weight of the past finally lifting, Jason and Emma share a quiet moment of understanding. They know there's still work to be done, but for the first time, the future feels like a promise worth keeping. Jason's words hang in the air, heavy with sincerity. Emma hesitates, her emotions swirling as she grapples with the implications of letting Jason fully into their lives. "Jason," she says softly, her eyes meeting his, "this isn't just about honoring Peter. This is about Ethan and what's best for him. If you're serious about being in his life, you have to be ready to commit, not just for now, but for the long haul." Jason nods, his expression resolute. "I know, Emma. I've spent too long running from responsibility and letting guilt dictate my actions. But being with you and Ethan has shown me what I've been missing. I'm ready to step up, not just as Peter's brother, but as someone Ethan can count on." Their conversation is interrupted by Ethan's excited shouts from the lake. He's found an old wooden rowboat tied to the dock and is waving enthusiastically for Jason and Emma to join him. The two adults exchange a glance, their shared smile reflecting the cautious hope growing between them. As they climb into the boat, Jason begins to share stories of his childhood adventures with Peter at the lake house, how they'd row out to the middle of the lake and pretend they were explorers charting uncharted waters. Ethan listens intently, his laughter ringing out as Jason animatedly recounts their misadventures. Midway through their excursion, Jason pauses, his voice softening. "Ethan, there's something I want to tell you," he begins, his tone careful but steady. Emma stiffens slightly, but she doesn't interrupt. "Your dad, my brother, was one of the most incredible people I've ever known. He was kind, brave, and always knew how to find the best in people. You remind me so much of him." Ethan tilts his head, curious. "Did you and Dad fight like I do with my friends sometimes?" he asks innocently. Jason chuckles, though there's a trace of sadness in his expression. "We did. But no matter what, we always loved each other. And now, I see him in you every day." As they return to shore, Ethan's questions grow, and Jason answers them with a level of openness he hadn't thought himself capable of before. Emma watches from the sidelines, her heart full as she sees Jason embrace his role as both an uncle and a father figure. Later that evening, as Ethan sleeps soundly in the lake house, Jason and Emma sit together on the porch, the moonlight reflecting off the water. Jason turns to Emma, his voice firm but gentle. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Emma. I won't let you or Ethan down." Emma smiles, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I believe you, Jason, and I think Peter would be proud of the man you're becoming." With the weight of the past finally lifting, Jason and Emma share a quiet moment of understanding. They know there's still work to be done, but for the first time, the future feels like a promise worth keeping. Months pass, and the once somber Harlow mansion is now a beacon of life and activity. The foundation Jason established in Peter's name has grown rapidly, thanks to Emma's leadership and Jason's relentless dedication. The mansion frequently hosts community events, mentoring workshops, and gatherings for the foundation's beneficiaries. What was once a place of isolation has become a symbol of hope and opportunity. Jason's transformation is evident to everyone who knows him. He no longer hides in his study or avoids meaningful connections. Instead, he actively participates in the lives of those around him, from mentoring young people in the foundation to playing chess with Ethan every evening. Ethan, too, is thriving. His confidence has blossomed, and his natural curiosity has been nurtured through Jason's guidance and Emma's unwavering support. His artistic talents are on full display during a foundation art showcase, where his sketches of the greenhouse and mansion draw admiration from attendees. Jason proudly stands by Ethan's side, introducing him to guests and sharing stories about the boy's creativity. Emma, meanwhile, finds a sense of fulfillment she hadn't thought possible. Her role in the foundation allows her to use her skills to help others, and the partnership she's built with Jason has become one of mutual respect and shared purpose. The once daunting mansion, now feels like a home, filled with laughter, love, and new memories. One afternoon, Jason calls Emma and Ethan into the newly restored greenhouse. Inside, they find a table set for 3, surrounded by blooming flowers and the soft hum of bees. Jason smiles as he hands Ethan a small wrapped gift. "This is for you, champ," he says. Ethan eagerly unwraps the package to reveal a beautifully crafted chess set. The pieces are carved from polished wood, each one unique. "Wow, this is amazing," Ethan exclaims, his eyes shining with excitement. Jason kneels to Ethan's level. "Your dad loved chess, and he would have been so proud to see how much you've learned. I hope this reminds you of him, and of how much you mean to me." Emma watches the exchange, tears welling in her eyes. She steps closer to Jason, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Jason, for everything." Jason stands and looks at Emma, his expression filled with gratitude and warmth. "I should be thanking you, Emma. You and Ethan gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, a family." In the weeks that follow, Emma and Ethan move into a cozy cottage near the mansion, a home Jason insists on gifting them as part of his commitment to their future. The cottage is filled with Emma's personal touches and Ethan's artwork, creating a space that feels uniquely theirs. The story comes full circle during a dinner held in the mansion's dining room. Jason, Emma, Ethan, and a few close friends from the foundation gather around the table, sharing stories and laughter. The once empty dining room is now alive with warmth and joy, a testament to the transformation each of them has undergone. As the evening winds down, Jason raises a glass and says, "To Peter." His memory brought us together, and his spirit lives on in everything we do. Everyone joins in the toast, their faces lit with a mixture of love and hope. In the final moments, Jason reflects on the journey that brought them to this point. "Sometimes life has a way of surprising you," he says, his voice steady. "The people you least expect can teach you the most about yourself. And when you open your heart, you find that family isn't just something you're born into. It's something you build."